All right, let's pick up where we left off with this UI. I want to make sure the JS is invoked and make sure that the calendar looks a lot nicer than we have currently. We could do that just by cleaning up the views we generated. The main month calendar is the one I'm going to focus on because that is going to end up being the one that's getting rendered since we're using that in our calendar partial here. This naming convention pertains to what view you see here. So that's how that works. So what we can do is just do a little Tailwind support for some of this stuff just to give it a nicer look and feel. So I'll start by adding those classes. So for each calendar view link, I want to add a class button default, margin top and bottom 2, and then I want to I actually won't make use of this. I was attempting to do some Ajax stuff with this, but it was kind of being a pain, so I ended up not using it, but I'll add it there for now in case you guys need it. That ID is what I'm getting at. And then this link will do the same thing too. So class is button default, margin Y is 2, ID equals next month. All right, and definitely a table scenario. This ships with CSS, which is nice, so I don't have to worry about so much of that, but there are things I'd like to just tighten up in terms of text styles. So we'll say text small, text gray darkest. Cool. And below here, I want to clean this up to have each day. We can get rid of this Hamel thing. It's not necessarily something I'm going to use. Chris was trying to, I think, just compensate for people that wanted Hamel support, which is cool. Let's see, what did I end up doing here? Yeah, I think I just did this. And then did a span tag around that with some classes. One thing I did change is how the day displays. I want it to look a little refined, so I did right on the day instance strftime, and then I'll just pass in one symbol, which is going to be just the day. Cool. And then the classes we'll end up with is text small, text gray darker. That's it for this view. So that should make the dates display a little nicer and look a lot better in my opinion. So what we can do now is clean up some of these grays. They're kind of nasty. So as simple as adding a style sheet, I'll call it calendar. If we re-render that page, this gray will be quite a bit lighter because those classes come by default thanks to the gem. So that stuff's pretty nice. Cool. So that's already looking great. You can see we link to the actual meeting itself here, which is good. Let's hook up the JavaScript next to make sure our tabs work. You'll notice in the view I have IDs for each tab named specific thing, and each one has a class of tab panel. We added our tab styles before, way back when on this style sheet in the JavaScript folder. The basic tabs panel itself will display none, and the one that's active will display block. So that's important to have. So what we'll do is with JS, we're going to target the tabs themselves. Each link's going to target the div with the ID of the same name. So calendar has an ID down here of calendar, and the same for this tab. This one is active by default, so we have a class to show it, and you'll notice in the view I have an active class, that active state styles that make it a indigo color there. And then when we click on the link, it's going to use the href value here. We're going to strip the hashtag from it and get that element based on its naming convention by ID to show the right panel. So what that looks like in the end is going to be this. So let's go and make a new, I don't think we need to make a new, I think I put it in meetings.js. And we did this document, add event listener. And just the basic turbo links. Load, since we're using turbo links, and then you could do a fat arrow function. And then we could do the logic. So I want to get the tab elements. Will be query selector all. And we're going to look for each tab. So within the nav tab div, look for each tab class. So that will basically be anything in this tab UL that has the tab class. So you see each link to has the tab class. So if we were to add more later, this would still work, which is the whole point. So we'll do a function called on tab click. Event. Oops. Cool. And then we'll have, we need to get the active tabs. Equals document query selector all, just the ones that are active. And here we'll toggle them, so we can take that for each function tab, and then we'll toggle that class with tab class list toggle active. Simple enough. So since this is going to be an array, we can loop through each thing in that array and toggle each class active if it is. Take the event we passed through in the first call here, and we'll take the target parent element. I'm referencing other code right now. I wouldn't know this off my head. I have to debug, but basically this is looking for the link, and then once we click on the link itself in the nav, it's going to get the parent element of it, which is going to be the li, and you notice the li is going to be the one that has the class of active or not, so that's important. So then we'll just add that, and then of course we will prevent default. We don't want it to do anything normally it would. And then show and hide each respective tab panel. So that's going to look like this. So we need to get the tab panel equals document get element by ID, and we can actually pass in the target .href .split, and that's just going to splice off the front end of that value, and we could tell it to just do by 1. So what that does is it gets the href of the link itself, which is going to end up being the full URL plus this, and then we'll splice everything there. We'll splice it when it gets to this, and then replace it, so then we could get the element by ID, which is going to end up being the same name. So it's kind of dynamically doing that, which means we won't have to do any very specific JavaScript to query for future tabs if we add any. So tab panel class list toggle, as simple as that. Okay, so then all that would happen on an event listener. So first we want to make sure there are tab elements. on a given page. So we could say not equal to null. And then for each one, we'll do a similar for each here. And then we'll take each tab, we'll listen for an event listener, or listen for a click, excuse me, and pass in the event. With a fat arrow there. And fire that function. Cool. So this is coming back and calling this function here, which we're passing the event through to do all these things. So a little interesting kind of stuff going on there, but all in all, it's a very bare bones way to incorporate tabs using data or hrefs and data, but you end up with something like this, which is awesome. We got it working. So the default is going to end up being calendar, and then we'll have meetings. Looks like our class isn't quite working though. Let's see if I typed something wrong there. I think I might just not have the styles in place. That one's active. That one should be active after I click on it. Oh, okay. I know what I did. Typo. This needs to be that. We don't need a period. So then we should get this. Cool. All right, so that's the initial meetings look and feel. We need to update the meeting show page, of course, and then add the commenting. And then, of course, when you create a new meeting or sketch session, I want to make sure the Stripe integration is there too. So we can do that all together. Let's first fancy up the views a little bit. It's kind of looking gross. So on the new meetings, we can have pretty basic template. So let's go and update that. All right, and that should do it for a new meeting. We need to update the form to look a lot nicer, and that can be done next. So I'll contain the whole form in a div. That's going to have some padding, background of white, border gray light, and rounded. So by default, it will just show a bunch of selects for the day, month, year, and the time. So we need to modify that just a bit, and you can pass an object, two objects through. And the first one's going to be how we render the start day. These come baked into a date time select field. So we could just say date.today. And start year is date.today.year. And then here's where in the very first video, I talked about the steps or intervals of how you can display minutes or seconds. And this one can go just in 15-minute intervals. So that's pretty neat. You can customize that to do whatever you want there. So then we'll give it a class in the second object. And that should do it. Cool. So for the next one, we kind of just repeat the same process, but it's going to be for a different symbol, being the end time here. So we'll update that to right here. Finally, I will add the same div before, and then a class of label here. And then below that, I ended up just rendering an HR tag of class kind of a rule. And eventually we'll render a payment form here. So maybe I'll just comment it out for now. So like render and then below that for form submits, this is kind of a gotcha. You can't just pass class like this. It will think it's some other property. So you actually just do it without the comma, which is kind of a mind twister, but you get used to it. So button primary, text base. I modified the padding on this one to be a little larger, just so it's a bigger button. Okay, I think that's it for our form. So we'll reuse this form on the edit screen as well, even though we won't actually have the ability to edit from the UI. It is available in the controller. So I'll just update that view just because. So it's quite similar to new. In fact, I'll copy all this over and just modify the text. Something like that. Again, we won't really make use of that. Although if you really wanted to, you could. It's something, if you want that to not be a thing, you could turn it off in the controller. But I'll leave it there for you guys. So you do select one edit. Apparently I don't have an ID yet, so whatever. Oh, it's 3, that's why. So if we were to go to edit, there's our edit screen now too. Cool. All right, so the show view is next, and that needs some definite love. This one's kind of a doozy, so I might end the video with it and keep going on after that. All right, like I said, that was a doozy. This one's got some cool UI, I think. On top of that, we have a comment section, which we'll soon to be implementing. But we'll end up having a partial that renders the form to comment as well as the comments themselves. So that's yet to come. Other than that, we're rendering the start time and end time, a cancel button for admins to use if they want to cancel the meeting, and then a meeting name as well. So one thing I didn't implement on this is if you did cancel a meeting, we'd refund the charge to Stripe. That would involve a webhook kind of scenario, which I'll probably get into more of that since Stripe can get pretty technical with all the events it has in its arsenal. But that's just something to take into account. So when I cancel the meeting, you're basically taking the person's money and running, which probably isn't a good practice. So definitely consider that, and maybe refunding part of the money unless you're all about no refunds. Anyway, this is what the UI looks like without comments. It's pretty bare bones, nothing crazy here, but we just have our start time and end time displaying in a nicer format. And then this will soon be the comment section. So far we've got our dashboard view and our actual meetings. And then we could go into the meeting and see the start time, end time, and so on and so forth. So coming soon, I will implement something where when we sign up, we'll redirect automatically to this view. The same is true for when you sign in. And then we'll implement some admin functionalities, the comments, like I said, and then finally work on some mailers and Stripe integration. So we'll be coming down the pipe next.